Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining AI Seeking the Truth, where we tell some of the stories that are kind of off the rails over here, but a lot of you seem to really enjoy these, and they are different than the cryptid that we mostly show on the other channel. And this is also our backup channel, so if you haven't subscribed, I'd like to invite you to. And let's get into this encounter. My dad purchased a small farm on the edge of a forest several years ago. This farm has a tiny farmhouse, which Dad decided to make his permanent residence. However, my room and sisters chose to continue living in the city. My sister's schooling, so Mom and Dad made plans to have overnight visits every month. Okay. The very first time that my sister and Mom arrived for their overnight stay, it was in the middle of the heat wave, and Dad had to utilize his specialized sprinkler system for his crops. The land in the farm had been so dry that even the creek flowing next to the farmhouse completely disappeared and cracks were forming in the dirt around the base of the farmhouse. Dad was very worried about the weather taking a toll on his crops, so he watched the Weather Channel after dinner, while my sister and Mom went into the separate bedrooms to get ready for bed. My sister was laying on her mattress texting a friend when she heard footsteps. Initially, she thought it was Dad. Dad was done watching TV and was getting ready for bed too, but when she heard the footsteps repeatedly shuffling between her bedroom door and Mom's, she thought it was very strange that Dad didn't open the doors nor knock. So she got up and opened the door to take a look. The moment the door opened, the sound of shuffling footsteps stopped. She saw Dad, who was still in front of the TV already sound asleep and snoring away in his recliner. Mom's door was shut, and it didn't look like Mom had left the room. She closed her door and laid back down on her mattress. Just as she was about to text good night to her friend, she heard those shuffling footsteps again. This time she realized that the footsteps sounded kind of like they were wet, like someone who got their clothes and footwear drenched in the beach, and are making the most pitter-patter on dry, solid ground. She turned to look at the gap under the door, and with the illumination from the ceiling light outside could see shadows from a pair of wet feet that were very rapidly shuffling itself back and forth between my sister's door and my mom's. She got up to open the door again, but like the first time, the footsteps stopped immediately, and all she saw was my dad comfortably snoring in front of the TV. There was no footprint, wet or dry, and no one else but Dad and her. She called out to Dad, trying to wake him up, but Dad was in such a deep sleep, he continued snoring. My sister felt a little freaked out, so she shut the door, laid back on her mattress, and pulled her blanket over her head. She called her friend to talk so that they could drown out the sound of those footsteps and provide something soothing. And some soothing company was good when you're afraid, until she fell asleep. The next morning, my sister asked Dad if he heard anything during the night. Dad said he heard nothing because he slept so soundly all night. She then asked Dad if he ever experienced anything strange while living in the farmhouse, but Dad said no. In fact, that farmhouse was the most peaceful place he'd ever lived in. Then she asked Mom if she had heard anything, which Mom also said she had heard nothing despite being a light sleeper. When night fell, my sister decided not to go to bed for dinner. Not to go to bed after dinner. Instead, she wanted to accompany Dad in watching the Weather Channel, so that she could stay awake to see what was making those footsteps. Just a couple of hours later, Dad, as expected, fell asleep in his recliner while watching TV. Mom had already gone to bed. My sister sat next to Dad, fully alert, watching and waiting for anything unusual. Then she heard those quick, soggy footsteps. However, this time the footsteps were coming from the kitchen. She turned to peek into the kitchen, and to her horror saw a very tall, pitch-black figure pacing back and forth on the kitchen floor. She described it as so tall it almost reached the ceiling. It was really skinny, like a stick figure that had been stretched out, with a narrow head that had no facial features at all except for pitch blackness. Whatever ghost monster entity that was, it just hastily paced back and forth in the kitchen while making those soppy, wet footprints. It didn't pay any attention to my sister nor my dad. My sister, with her eyes still on the mystery figure, grabbed Dad's shoulder to try to wake him, but Dad just didn't budge. He stayed asleep and kept snoring, as though he was in a drug-induced slumber. She then ran into my mom's room. Surprisingly, Mom, who was a light sleeper her whole life, didn't stir at all when my sister entered. Mom remained sound asleep, even when my sister jumped onto her bed. My sister kept her eyes on the bedroom door for the rest of the night, refusing to shut her eyes until sunrise. When morning came, my sister begged Mom to bring her home. Dad was disappointed because they were supposed to stay another night and help out around the farm during the day. My sister, who has a serious neurological disorder, told Mom and Dad that she was not able to sleep at all in the farmhouse, thus putting her health at risk. Eventually, Mom relented, much to my sister's relief. It has been several years since my sister witnessed whatever that was in my dad's farmhouse kitchen. My sister refused to spend the night at my dad's farm, no matter how late it gets during their visits. She never told Mom nor Dad because she didn't think they would believe her. To this day, Dad lives in that farmhouse. So far, he has never reported anything spooky nor strange. Even when Mom stays overnight with Dad, Mom never experiences anything out of the ordinary. Wow, that story could go a lot of different ways. Something could be making your Mom and Dad sleep so heavily that they're not able to witness what's going on. Maybe like sleep paralysis or something like that it could be doing to them. It could be just about anything. It could be, maybe your sister's having issues with something and nobody else is. It could be just, her having the issue. But no matter what's going on in the house, I feel that you should at least tell your Mom and Dad what's going on so they're not just sleeping in there and, not knowing what's going on. That would bother me the most, is if I wasn't told, because I would want to know what was going on. Especially if they're sleeping in there and they don't know what's going on. I mean, that could be dangerous to them or anybody else that stayed there. So I think if you go talk to them, and you're calm about it and sit down and visit with them, I think they'll understand you. At least they will understand your concerns, and at least you can get that off your chest if something happens, at least you've told them. Thank you for listening, guys, and I hope you enjoyed this one, and we'll have more to come just as soon as I can get through the emails, guys. I hope you enjoy these kind, and if you do, we'll keep doing it. Thank you for listening.